Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we'll explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. Well, we are back with another episode, and I'm really excited. I was just talking to TS off the mic here about how the guys have really showed up in the past couple of weeks. So by the time you're hearing this episode, right? By the time you're hearing this episode, we'll have talked to 4 guys in a row. So it's really cool because I really want to create a space where everybody has a voice, and that means all genders, all gender identities, and all skin colors, and all types of people. So I'm excited to have had an opportunity to be interviewing the guys and hearing the guys' stories and experiences. And we're going to continue that streak today with TS. I have known TS now kind of for about maybe 2-ish years or so through affiliation with our professional association and a lot of kind of sidebar conversations at events and so forth. So I'm really excited to finally have you on the episode or on the podcast, have your own episode on the podcast. And I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn it over to you, TS. Tell us, how would you like to be known and a little bit about yourself?
So I am TS. I don't know why that bears reiterating, but I think adjectives, some identifiers as they relate to me, energetic. I'm outgoing. I think, as you mentioned in our interactions, birds of a feather flock together, if you will. Some people might have run with this one way or run with this the other, but I'm very real. Almost maybe to a fault, again, for some people taking it that direction. Other labels I've worn or continue to wear: entrepreneur, coach in a variety of different facets. And then I go to my personal life. So I'm a husband. I'm a dad. I am, a friend, to all those who know me. So
nice. Yeah. I
I
love these descriptors, and I also love how you say labels that I wear. That's really interesting. And just tell us just a snippet. Like what does that mean to you when you say labels that I wear?
I think it comes from, so I've done some diversity and inclusion, D&I, DEI, and, B, work in the past, and, a lot of work in and around, building rapport and things like that. And, just levels of relationships. You can go to the classic model: level 1, level 2, level 3. At the end of the day, these are all kind of, I literally look at them as, I could walk around with any one of those name badges on me, and then there's going to be some sort of interaction that comes out of that, if you will.
Nice. And what I hear from that also is that they're all true, and that they're all interchangeable, and that no one of them is really complete enough to describe who you are as a person.
Exactly. And you start to, right, some of them are surface level, and then some, if you want to go there with me, level 2, level 3, what does it mean for me to be a dad in my world, in my household?
Nice. Well, I'm hoping we're going to hear some of this and some of what this means in your story today. So I know you and I haven't talked, as I, confirm with all guests. Like I don't pre-screen your topics or your stories. I love to hear them for the first time and have that front row seat that I'm always talking about. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to share with all of us today. Before we get started, though, I always ask every guest the same question, and that is, as you look ahead to the conversation we're going to have and our time together, what would be your intention for yourself today?
Honestly, I'm excited to see where this goes. Again, to your point, there's no audience out there. There's no priming here. So I'm excited, curious. I walk around as an open book, but I've noticed too that then that requires the other person in the conversation to ask those unlocking questions. So again, very curious, and I, being that we're both in kind of the learning and development field, and dabble in coaching or coach practitioners or whatever, I'm almost curious to see your questions too, to see how you unlock me, Paul.
Okay. Unlocking, and there's the gauntlet, right? So, all right. Well, and the funny thing is we could get you and I could go back and forth in the wordplay on this. What do you mean by unlocking? What do you mean when you ask me what I mean by unlocking? So let's see how it unfolds. I really love that intention, and the excited to see where it goes. It sounds like you are curious to see what unfolds for yourself just in the telling of your own story. And that's always one of the most exciting parts for me. My intention for you is to create that space to ask those curious and unlocking questions, like you said. And that hopefully, and I want to stop using that word hopefully, and that your story connects with someone or many someones out there, that someone will hear something in your story that they can relate to, that changes how they were feeling about themselves that day, creates a little bit of inspiration and possibility, and maybe even empowers somebody to think differently about themselves and perhaps even others. So that's my intention.
Paul, I'll mention too, and I'm not only, a guest here now, but a fan of your podcast. Have listened to several episodes. I will say that I'm entering into this space feeling like I'm not your standard guest, if that makes sense. And so, I'll put this out there. I don't know if I've ever been on a comma, or if I've been on a comma. It's only been for, I have a very, kind of specific operating manner. So again, I'll be curious to see if, as you say, my story, how it strikes a chord with who I imagine are your audience members out there.
Okay. All right. Okay, cool. Well, then it's interesting because you say, well, I don't know if I've ever been on a comma, and I was going to go into the 5 questions. Everybody gets asked the same 5 questions. And the first question is, where have you found yourself sitting on a comma in your life? So actually, let's let that be the opener. Like, how would you respond to that if there's kind of a question about that? What would you say to that question?
Oh, well, I feel like there's a little bit of hubris in a response to a question like that. So maybe just to further the conversation, I will grant that, being on a comma, if I were to have said, have I been on a comma? Again, not been on it very long. I feel like I'm comfortable with change. Again, I'm pretty energetic, a go-getter. When I feel like I'm in an uncomfortable situation, which I feel like oftentimes, that's the comma, is you're sitting in this uncomfortable situation. It's like, how long can you stand it? And I feel kind of sad sometimes for individuals who have relayed stories to me about being on a comma, and it's like, wow, like it's a testament to kind of their endurance, their stamina, their perseverance to be on a comma for that long. And I don't know, maybe this is a little unpacking of me that, I maybe don't stand it that long. So why not change it? Why not get to something else? I could speak to my time in the United States Air Force. I could speak to, previous relationships. Again, I find myself, coming to kind of a hinge point, and it's like, let's cut over. Like, let's see what else is out there, right? My time in the Air Force, as it was drawing to close, there were some opportunities that were dangled in front of me, and I could have sat there and waffled and, even extend it. You can extend your time in the service. You can extend your contracts, but it's like, no, I've got bigger, better, fish to fry. I have things to move on. Same thing with like former relationships. So anytime, I kind of sit there and reflect, particular, and we'll just say, or I'll just clarify, romantic relationships, oftentimes it's like, I could either sit here and endure this, but at the end of the day, that's no good for either party involved. So it's kind of like, let's move on. Let's, we this is a limited life that we have, and so why spend it spinning our wheels when we can go off, and maybe I need to be alone for a while and do a little bit more self-discovery, or I always like to assume the best of intentions for the other individual as well. It's like, go work on your self-development, or at most go find that other romantic partner that you're supposed to be with. I feel like that's the journey.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from UTS, and then I want to kind of ask another question, is that as you see it now, you are not a person who tends to sit on commas very much or for very long, that you tend to be a very moving and a very fluid and a very kind of responsive and adaptive person. That's what I think I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think so. I feel, but now I'm just waiting for kind of the unlocking question, the question of like, well, have you considered?
No. Well, no. And keep in mind, like that's not, the point of the podcast isn't, no, everybody sits on a comma and where's yours and your denial and all that kind of stuff. That's actually a different podcast I'm working on. No, I'm just kidding. No, but here's what I'm curious about. How do you define the sitting on a comma?
Well, I know. And that's the hard thing too. And I reflect back to a conversation I had with my team. So, I was with the state of California for 13 years and had some wonderful teammates and some wonderful team compositions. And towards the end of my tenure there, the division, my leadership was great to have kind of facilitated session in talking about, failure. And it was like, oh, wow, this is like meaty. And I still remember specifically one of my team members was like, oh, TS isn't going to get anything out of this conversation because he's never experienced failure in his entire life. And it's like, well, darn, to that point. And then I kind of resolutely was like, okay, over the next 6 months, like, I'm going to try and tackle some things and, let's see if I can quote unquote fail. But at the end of the day, kind of to your point, it's like, well, if you have a specific lens on it, nothing is ever really a failure. You either succeed or you learn from something. And even in learning something, and hopefully this isn't coming across too cliche, but essentially it was like, well, yeah, okay, kind of breathe on my nails and, buff the shirt a little bit. It's like, yeah, I don't have any failures because everything is a learning opportunity, right? And that kind of lifelong learner mindset or something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, and it's been interesting. I've always kind of had my own take on it, my own personal life experiences. And then in interviewing folks and hearing their stories for the podcast, what's really cool about this metaphor of sitting on a comma and getting off the comma is how rich it is and how flexible it is, right? I describe it for the sake of kind of explaining things and describing the podcast and my coaching services and so forth as, kind of being stuck and getting unstuck. And then there's all these different ways you can unpack that. And yet it's been really powerful to see how every single person kind of takes it in their own way, right? Some people think of it as being stuck. Some people think of it as, boy, this has been like a respite. It's been an opportunity to pause and recover. Some people say, wow, it's a learning journey. Some people talk about specific commas. Some people say, I've heard walking on commas or collecting commas. It's really cool how it doesn't matter whether there's a definition for it. It means something to everyone. And now what you're sharing is that when you hear sitting on a comma, there's this relationship with failure, and that you're fortunate to be able to say, I learn from every experience. So I don't see anything as a failure.
Yeah.
Unless what you're saying is you're boasting that you're perfect and you've never had failures.
When my wife listens to this episode, if I were to admit to that, it would drive her bonkers. So,
so let's do this then. So, because the questions are all, you're going to be able to answer these questions. There's no specific direction we're trying to go. This is really you talking about your experience with sitting on a comma. And so far, what you've said is that I don't sit on them very often. I don't sit on them very long, and I learn from them when and if I do experience one, but that generally speaking, this isn't a big element of my life. Is that fair?
Yes. Yes. I'm having a thought kind of go through my mind right now that maybe it deserves some unpacking, or, I want to, as you were kind of talking through how it means something to everybody, or, figurative versus literal. I don't know if I've ever shared with you, I'm another kind of hat that I didn't put out there. I'm a longtime musician. I picked up the self-taught guitar after my senior year of high school, before going into the military. And yeah, I not only playing instruments, but then I found very early on being kind of adept at being a lyricist as well, which, that's kind of the perfect world, because now you're writing the music and you're writing the words, and you slap them together, and next thing you know, you got a song. And I'll share that with only in the last 2 years, I had a span. I'll ballpark it at around 6 or 7 years. Nice. Talk about never having been on a comma of writer's block, for lyrics, kind of a lyricist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. So what brought that up for you? I'm curious.
Well, again, trying to bring myself back down to earth, that I'm making all these grandiose claims of having never been on a comma, or, and if I do find myself on a comma, moving beyond it very quickly. But now, as I've kind of dug in real deep, and, yeah, and going to that, I guess I entered into this space of, in a professional sense, right? Because we know each other in a professional capacity. So, like, we're starting to develop a friendship as well. But
Yeah.
I have many other facets of my life that, I dabble in: athletics and music. And yeah, actually, if I'm allowed to delve into the kind of music.
Of course. Yeah, this is definitely not about just work things. So that feels to me like that really kind of surfaced itself, and it seems prominent to you right now. Let's unpack that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, it came about. I can kind of, again, I was ballparking it. So I've been in many projects. I've tried to start a few of my own, some successful, some not so successful. But then also, sometimes the opportunity presents itself that you can at least go audition with another project. And I was actually in a project here in Sacramento, and it was, as always, there's a honeymoon phase. It was very enjoyable, something new at the outset. But then it started to evolve a little bit, and there was definitely some strong personalities. And essentially, it came to a point where this individual kind of said, you are not a great musician, you're not a great lyricist, and just kind of blew a hole in my confidence. And but again, to the kind of the off the comma thing, I look at, well, I needed to exit that project quickly. Some people could have, wallowed in that a little bit, but no, very quickly I was like, okay, well, if that's the way you feel, I'm out. But I carried that with me for a number of years. And it was only during this last 2 years that I had reconnected with a mutual friend of mine and my wife, of me and my wife. And it was interesting because he was like, hey, let's go on this journey. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for it. I was still, with the state of California, and he had a little bit of freedom there. And then, interestingly enough, the roles kind of reversed. Like he got a big boy job. We still kind of kid him about that a little bit. But then I had stepped away from my career with the state of California. So the roles were reversed, and I approached him, and he kind of gave me the same line, but he was a little bit, whereas I was like, I can't go on this journey. He
Gave you the same line about what? I'm sorry. I know I
Oh
told
no,
you
that's okay.
before that I would jump in, but like for the benefit of those who are listening to this story, which by the way, fascinated. I'm really curious to see this unfold.
Yeah.
You said he gave me the same line. What were you talking about there?
I have too much going on. I don't know if I have the time to go on this journey with you.
So this was to get back into music and to start exploring.
So he's a creative in a different vein. He's more of poetry and kind of short story. We both, sorry, many hats. We've both done live either stage or screen. Also, we tend to be in front of the camera, but for his like actual kind of sit down creativity, his is more of poetry and short story, whereas mine is more of in the music vein. So yeah.
And so you had approached him to do some collaboration, or
No, it kind of supporting each other on like creative recovery.
Yeah.
He had come across some materials, and he had shared them with, again, when he was the initiator, and I kind of hung on to the materials, and I was like, oh, these are nice, but again, I'm not in the right spot. And then when it flipped around and I was like, hey, remember these materials? And again, the roles were kind of reversed. And he's like, I'm really not. He did me a kindness, and he's like, I will try and keep up with you, and I'll try and support you. And I was like, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. He, did me more of a favor than I did him. 2 years prior. So,
so this was a couple of years ago, you said.
Yeah.
And that was it sounds like you were looking to kind of reactivate this artistic side of you and start to kind of bring it back up again and to pick it up and carry it again and work on it, bring it back to life.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Exactly.
I'm going to jump into the second question because there's a lot of room for you to there's a lot of room for freedom in there for you to continue to explore. The second question is, what did this create for you? So if you think about sitting on this comma with, this musical side of you and the musical endeavor, this feedback that you were given all these years ago, that you kind of closed the door on that. And now you're picking it back up again and you're curious, like, what's happening for you here? What is this creating for you?
It's been fulfilling. I wrote a few months ago, maybe about 6 months ago, I wrote my first kind of lyrical song in a long time, 6, 7, 8 years. And it was very fulfilling. Whereas I think, and I don't know, if it's, everything happens for a reason or what, that this was a spark, but all through those previous years, and obviously with the pandemic, and we all had this kind of shared trauma. I heard that term somewhere, and I was like, I like that. But we all experienced it in different ways. Mm-hmm. I felt like in those years, I had really kind of exhausted my other outlets, if that makes sense, of the physical aspect of working out or running, or throwing myself into work and maybe a big meaty research project or something like that, or I don't know if this sounds, but leaning so heavily into my friends and family, to the point they're like, TS, you've been using us quite a bit as an outlet. Maybe you should share the love a little bit more. It was really kind of nice to get back to this other outlet that had been laying fallow for such a long time.
Yeah. Okay. And so where are you with that now? I'm just curious.
Trying to churn out lyric after lyric. And it's interesting too, because the mutual friend, even though he, kind of begrudgingly came along, I had made some headway. So then I circled back, and I wouldn't let him be of two minds. I was like, you're coming along with me. And to the point where he actually came and visited recently, and he was talking about some poetry put together, and he's like, oh, but the publishers and the whole, I don't like all the business machinations of that. And I was like, well, like, let me take that on. And so he's been sending me like poems, and I'm trying to figure out how to like package this and market this and whatnot. But it's been fascinating too, because then I'll kind of read through his poems, and I had this realization. Well, I think I had this realization a long time ago, but lyrics without music are essentially poems. And so in him sharing, it was just this nice kind of synergy. So in him sharing, then I would, get a thought or an idea, and I would, create something from scratch, or I would go and revisit a previous lyric sheet and go, oh, maybe I need to fine tune this a little bit more. And so it was this just kind of snowball effect of getting back on this creative track.
And what I'm hearing from you is that, first of all, let's just acknowledge you for having been given that feedback at that time, which I would say, if that was me, I would have labeled that feedback as harsh. And then you let it sit fallow for a while. You're bringing it back up again. So acknowledging you for, despite what somebody else said, you're still working it and moving it forward because it's a part of you. And I'm also seeing this extra energy in this synergy, that there's something about this play between your spoken word artist friend and your music, and those supporting each other, building something off of each other. Like, I definitely see the dynamic that you're describing, and it being collaboration and not just a solo effort.
Yeah, solo effort, that's no fun. I know there are a lot of quote unquote solo artists out there, but I think maybe what we don't see are the collaborators that they have behind the scenes. I can't remember the name of the series on Netflix, but it was around. They spotlighted Dua Lipa,
Mm-hmm.
which is amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but it was cool because they brought her collaborators into the space as well, and it was like, she doesn't go it alone. And I feel like maybe that was a part of my journey too, was I felt so much like I had to like go it alone on all of that.
What's significant about that? Because that seems like, I can't tell you why, but I'm feeling a little kind of vibe there, that there's something significant about this relationship between going it alone and not going it alone, and that might have some more significant meaning to you. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, again, my mind gets going too. And the proverb, I won't attribute it to any, individual or culture. If you want to go fast, go it alone. But if you want to go far, then go together. So what's, I don't know why sad was the first word to get, but what's sad is like that. I want that. And that's what I've continued to strive for. I don't want to put it on everybody else, i.e. that individual who kind of, shot a hole in my confidence. But, it was like, I wanted that. I would have loved for that journey to continue going forward for forever, if you will. But I don't know. I keep finding myself in some of these situations where I've had to withdraw and feel like I had to go it alone. I don't know.
So, I mean, that can be a powerful part of the experience. Like you described, you said going it alone is, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was essentially like going it alone sucks. And I was like, well, for you, right? But everybody has their own different level of need. And yet I really appreciate you acknowledging that even folks who go it alone often have collaborators. Even some of the artists and musicians I've interviewed on the podcast who are known for being solo have said, and there's this team of people who help in all of this myriad of ways and so forth.
Well, and Paul, I want to push back. You had mentioned for me, and I feel like I was having this conversation with somebody else the other day. at the end of the, or not at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, when civilizations came together, it was society, we were coming together to pool resources, and, there was safety and security and numbers. Have we gotten too far from that? Why, and then we find ourselves here in 2023.
Mm,
Because I'd like to think that's still relevant if we're gonna, survive whatever this thing is, or if we're gonna continue to go far into the future. We gotta start coming back together.
yeah. Well, it's a good point. It's a very valid point, right? What's significant about that for you?
I keep trying to maneuver myself into these situations where I get to work with collectives of individuals, and I keep finding in certain instances it like blowing up in my face, and it's like, what is going on here? I don't know.
Mm. Why do you think that is? Because you said that, right? You said I reach out and I try to create these collaborative or collective experiences, and then something comes up and I find myself having to go it solo for a while.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop you from pursuing what you want.
Yeah, I can't let outside forces, have an effect on me. I have a life to live. I have, kind of goals and things that I want to achieve. I don't know. I just feel like I know it would be easier with other individuals, but they have to be willing accomplices.
I want to take back that last question, though. That I think there's a different question I want to ask, which is, instead of why do you think that is, what does it create for you in those periods where now, okay, that door closed, I'm back to going in it on my own? Like, what's happening for you in that space?
It's not good. You can drive yourself crazy with your own thoughts and your own, it's like Gollum and Lord of the Ring. It's your precious here. At the end of the day, you want the other opinions and feedback to shape this thing and watch it grow, and then ultimately to put it in front of an audience. I'll go back to the kind of creative, the entertainment performance aspect of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, you want to put that in front of people and let other people enjoy it. And I think maybe I'm cut a little different from this standpoint is, and then to be able to give credit to, this wasn't just me. Like, I want to give credit to these wonderful collaborators and to showcase for the rest of the world that, hey, look at this is awesome when we can get people together. Look what we can accomplish.
It's interesting, and this is based on what I know about you, but again, correct me if I misstate anything here. It seems like you want, in this personal creative slice of your life, you want that to be like your professional life, because that's how you show up in your professional life, right?
Yeah, exactly. For whatever reason, that seems to have worked. But again, I listed off the labels and, talked about my different hats or whatever. I just want to get to a place where all those hats are clicking, and I have, these groups and we're doing wonderful things. And I don't know, maybe that's too much to expect, or I'm running around with, rose-colored glasses on, but wouldn't that be such a wonderful place?
Well, I mean, it sounds like it would be. And I think, I love this conversation, right? Because I don't think it's a matter of, is that right? Or, is it okay? Like, that's important to you, and you're taking steps to create that. And these challenges are presenting themselves for you. And so it seems like, if you can set aside the good or the bad or the right or the wrong of it, it's like, what is this story telling me? So it's a good segue into the next question, which is, what have you, or what are you learning about yourself as a result of being in this place? What do you think this tells you, or might reveal to you? That I'm not implying there's some magic answer like, oh, dig, and you're going to find that stone. It's like, well, what do you think this is revealing for you?
I've had other kind of things. 2023 has been pretty rough. I've had other things pop up over the last, 10, well, now almost 11 months, that have really kind of highlighted for me that, in spite of what I think of myself as an individual contributor, and again, you can put me in any drop me in any scene, any scenario, or more importantly, what other individuals might be seeing of me as, there's the kind of like, and again, hopefully I'm not tooting my horn too much, or, there's some hubris in here, but essentially,
what I will say is this is your story today. It's your platform. So you say whatever you want, feel, and need to say.
the superstar syndrome, of like, oh, TS can do it all, and it's either as a result of his experiences or the lifelong learning, the skills, or whatnot. Okay, we can acknowledge that, but don't let that dissuade you from stepping in and like having a conversation with me and approaching me. And I would hope that in every interaction with every individual, one of their takeaways from our interaction would be, it'd be really cool to do fill in the blank with TS, to, tackle something, or to, brainstorm something, or to, I don't know, again, fill in the blank. Like, and I don't know that everybody goes away with that, but what I've to your question, I have a desperate need for that, is what I've kind of discovered over the last several months, is I have a desperate need to connect with individuals and to collaborate in spite of what I might be exuding.
So that is I'm going to acknowledge you, because that is a very brave self-acknowledgement, a very brave and courageous thing to say. And it's vulnerable and it's real and it's authentic. And so let's accept that as the truth that it is, without any placing any value on that. You said, I have a desperate need for this connection. What's important about that for you? Or what is it that is not there that you're trying to create through this?
Well, again, a couple of different facets, and here we go, folks. Let's like get real. I stepped away from the career with the state of California. I'm now a year and a half into this business, and I've had a couple of opportunities that have really filled my cup. And honestly, without those, I don't know that I would be here. But I'm trying to avoid getting into, kind of desperation mode. And I think not from like a financial sense or anything like that, but, it's like,
well, an acknowledgement, right? For all of us. And I mean, all of us out there who are self-employed or partially self-employed or gig workers or what have you. Like, I think everybody can relate to a little bit of what you're talking about. Is it can be any number of things on the wheel, but when you're self-employed and you're taking your own destiny in your hand, there's always things that feel like, how am I going to do this? Right. So like, to acknowledge you and prop you up on this.
I appreciate that. And not even necessarily how am I going to do this? It's, I can only sit at my kitchen counter, because that's my office space at this point, and brainstorm with the refrigerator. Well, no, that makes me sound like I'm a habit eater. So I can only brainstorm with the coffee pot, or, do the like Goodwill Hunting, write the chalk etchings on the sliding glass door so much before I want another opportunity. I want that email that comes out of the blue, or, I think I shared with you, I just went for my first state contract, and, I want that to hit. And again, it's not even from a financial standpoint. It's like, I want to continue to get out into the world and network and do great work with individuals. Like it's that desperate need for collaboration, and to have that impact on many, many individuals.
So I'm gonna ask you to go one step deeper because I can relate. Like I can sit here and say I can relate. I make all kinds of assumptions, but so that I don't make assumptions, and for the benefit of anybody else
Yeah.
who's hearing you right now and is experiencing the same thing, like you've come really close and been clear about what you've described. Like whether it's the coffee pot or the refrigerator, like that's the work team that I have, and they don't. There's something that the coffee pot and the refrigerator and the grease board aren't giving you that connection would give you. What is that?
Yeah. I think I've always been looking for, ever since we can really go into my childhood here, a sense of community, a sense of belonging. And maybe it goes to my, at the beginning of the day, coming together as a society, as a civilization, just to maybe feel safe in and amongst individuals.
Yeah.
And in return, I can make others feel safe too. I feel like I've talked to many individual over the last several weeks or months. I don't even know if we can call it post-pandemic, but they're struggling and they're having a hard time, and I feel honored that they confide in me. And I'm like, I'll offer up. You're not, as long as I'm up 6 feet above ground, you're not going this alone, right? To be able to put that out there, and whether or not they reciprocate that, that's fine. I would love it if they, if that reciprocation, was just kind of there or assumed. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that in there.
Yeah. And I'm hearing you describe things. You gave us great words, and I'm adding these words to it if they stick: connection, belonging, and also describing very honestly that you're a giving person. I think that's come clear in everything that you've shared with us, and that sometimes you'd like to be a receiving person as well. Like there's this flow. There's this
every once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's so similar to what so many other self-employed and solopreneurs, self-employed people and solopreneurs that I've talked to have said. It's like, the autonomy and the freedom and the independence is great. And sometimes I miss being on a team. I just miss that interaction on the daily basis. So,
yeah. And I'll, we can venture into another corner, back to the music thing. I'm pulling songs together. What's the next logical step? Bring individuals together to start some sort of, a duo, a trio, a multi-person band, which again, we're out there, we're bringing energy to the world. We're out there, and getting to interact with individuals, hopefully, spreading positive messages and things like that. And again, I'll go to even, my personal life, just the friends and family, aspect. I love continuing to build out my friends group, and even in the core here with our family, continuing to have that collaboration and that connection with my wife, my kids, my extended family, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law.
Yeah.
And her family. So,
well, you've literally just said you want to connect people and bring people together, that you want to create groups and communities. I mean, you literally basically just said that you want to be the agent of connection. So I'm laughing because it's like, oh my God, there's like 7 questions I want to ask. And then there's the next one. What question would you ask yourself having heard that reflection?
Well, I would go to, how do I do that? But again, to the whole premise here of I feel like I know how to do that, and I will continue to put myself out there, continue to make connections, help connect other individuals. I will continue to do all of that. Not even working towards an end game. Just like this is the operating style. Let's just keep operating like this, and we hope that's all we can do, that great things come of it.
Well, so then I'll ask this 4th question then. So what changes for you as a result of sitting on this comma and what you've shared with us?
I don't know that anything changes.
Okay. Well, and/or has anything changed? Because really the way the question is worded is what has changed for you. Because a lot of times people are talking about a story from the past.
Yeah.
If you look at the comma you sat on with music and the experience that unfolded with music, what changed for you as a result of that experience that you shared with us?
Again, that reviving that outlet, and probably the almost the most important outlet aside from, friends and family, which I would probably set number one. Just becoming a more fulfilled individual, which in turn, kind of spirals outwards to make myself kind of a complete individual and be able to wake up and, go about business day in and day out. I won't necessarily say it's like root cause, kind of a root cause analysis there, but it's definitely a big part. And so taking the time to continue to revive and hopefully have that outlet thrive going forward.
Something just came up for me, and this happens a lot. So I kind of say what comes to me. It doesn't make it right. So it's a conversation starter. I'm wondering, because you were kind of asking yourself the question earlier, what we came at it 2 or 3 different ways, but I keep trying to create connection, doors close, and I find myself in these solo periods for a while. And it's interesting because now that you've shared what you've shared, it seems like for whatever reason, these solo periods continue to take you to this place of connection. They continue to reinforce and reinforce and reinforce how important this connection is for you. So what I'm curious is, what if that's the purpose?
So I know. And so this is an interesting take because, and I will share, I'm definitely a firm believer in kind of Taoism, a Taoist perspective on things. And so I do have to stop every once in a while and ask myself, if I find myself on this solo track and it doesn't feel good, have I strayed too far from the path that's laid out before me? And I need to, and now this is the course correction back to the path, and I need to just keep walking that path. Without teasing it out too much. Again, going back to this kind of pivotal point of having my confidence shot through and it going on this long 6, 7, 8 year hiatus or solo journey. Well, that's not really fair that I got set, do I have to rewind and never enter into that project with that individual? I don't, how do you troubleshoot that?
Yeah. Well, that's what's really cool about this, right? And that's what's really cool about what you get to explore with this, because nobody's going to have that answer for you. That your answer is your answer. And yet I can give you some questions for you to think about, because the way you've described it so far is, and the most recent time just now, that's not really fair. How do I create that with that person? And yet somebody standing at another corner of the room could see this from a different angle and a different point of view. Is why does it have to be that person? So, and then there's lots of other questions, right? But notice just what you've shared with us so far has been, boy, I was really affected and really disappointed when the door shut because of that person, or because this other person wasn't available. And yet that seemed to be the end of it in both of those situations. And also yet your outcome that you're looking for, your need, your want, your desire is still there.
Right. No, well,
what other pathways are available?
I'm trying to tease out kind of from your comments with,
I'm not pressing you for an answer to that, but whatever reaction you have.
My lenses essentially, was I supposed to go on this 7, 8 year journey to get to the point where I am at now? It was a really awful time period.
Yeah. Acknowledge that. Yeah. What was the hardest part?
When all the other outlets were exhausted and I really needed that one and it wasn't there, and I couldn't even get it's like Tinder and the flint and steel, couldn't even get a little spark there just to kind of rekindle it. And it was well, how long is this going to go on for that I can't get this spark?
And so you said something very important that I don't think was really revealed and it's a good point for all of us as the listeners, right? Is we never really know how important something is to someone. And what you just revealed is it wasn't just, oh, well, okay, that door closed. Here's another one. Here's another one. Like, you've exhausted all the other doors, and this one was really important. So that had to be extremely disappointing, not only to have something that was that important to you basically kind of close on you, but at the end of a hallway full of closed doors.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot to carry.
It is. And I've carried a lot, Paul. I've had really, I'm not trying to, be a Doug Downer, Debbie Downer, I feel like I've been through I'm sure we'll have some shared audience members, listeners who, we have a shared connection with, and I think they'll know, kind of my backstory. And for those who haven't heard me talk about this little piece, they'll be like, geez, like TS just can't catch a break.
Yeah. Well, I want to go to the next question, but it would feel inauthentic to give you an opportunity to add something else to it. It sounds like there's a lot more you could share here, and we could really, I could try to crack you open and like, let's go all the way in there, right? But it feels like you've gotten to a place where you've kind of said what you needed to say about that. Before we go to the last question, is there anything you would add, or is there anything else that's important for you to say or share about this experience that you've just revealed to us?
Well, so I've kicked around the idea of, and people have said like, you should like write a script about like your life up to the, so, I've kicked around like the idea of like a midlife memoir. I don't know if people do that, and like part 1 and part 2 later, towards the end there, but like I don't know what a working title would be, but it's a lot. And maybe if I can offer up for the listeners, even just sharing this little part, and maybe it wasn't as devastating in their ears and their minds as I was going through it, but just keep going, right? Maybe that's what I could tease out of that, rekindling the spark. And how long is this going to go on for? Well, if if you can do it for 1 minute, you can do it for 2 minutes. If you can do it for 2 minutes, you can do it for 3 minutes, right? And you just keep like building it up, and you keep going. You don't let any comma stop you, again, to kind of put it in terms of our podcast here.
Well, and you yourself even said, earlier in our conversation that, the door closed on you, and you I wrote it down. Let me see here. You left quickly, but still carried it. And then here it was a number of years later, you picked it back up again. So even when it feels like it's done and complete, for those of us who have a few more years under the belt, right, than perhaps some of our younger listeners, like what you consider to be finished and complete today, 10, 20 years later, I mean, that's a lot of time to pass for something to still stay closed and complete.
Yeah.
I'm also curious too, as you're thinking about how do I get this out of me? How do I express this in memoir form or what have you? And you've just talked about this musical slice of your life. And I'm wondering what role that might play in how you express this experience.
I've looked at it 2 ways. Of one, eventually the players will come together. The Country Music Awards just happened. I don't know if this dates the podcast or whatever. And the Best New Artist, Jelly Roll. And he gave this speech, and it was really cool because he's like, there's a reason that the windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, we all need to carry that with us. But essentially, yeah, just keep like going. You have such a big future ahead of you. And I again have to imagine, have the hope that as long as we keep pressing forward, like something's got to happen, right? It has to happen. But then every once in a while, and this will sneak in, it's like, no, this is it. This is it. This is the last time I'm going to put myself through this. Maybe it isn't, but right now I'm drawing a line in the sand and I'm saying, this is the last time I'm going to put myself through this. Maybe I have to put all my energy into it, or maybe I'm a little guarded, and maybe that ultimately sets me up for failure. But this is the absolute last time. I can't keep doing it. But it's more of the future is full of possibilities.
I'm chuckling because I can so self-reference and relate. And then I'm also thinking about, I won't name the artist. There's one that comes to mind, but I know that artist isn't the only one, but you know, their 42nd farewell tour. Yes, I think you've already answered question number 5, but I'm going to ask it again in case there's anything you would add. What does getting off the comma look like for you?
It looks like self-care and self-fulfilling. We're talking about that specific instance, and where I am now, having gone through that 8-year journey and partnered up with a caring creative, and now sitting here and almost the end of 2023, not not quite on the level of self-actualization, but you know, we'll go with self-care. If you move beyond that comma, you're a different person. I'd like to think you're a better person. No, I'll put it on my terms. I'm a different person. I'm a better person, and just try and take care of myself.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the honesty in that reflection, and I'll come back full circle then. You know, you talked about your intention earlier. Now I would ask you, what would you acknowledge yourself for, having kind of been through this conversation today?
Yeah, having had this conversation, been through this experience, because I've reflected on it before, but I don't think you can wear the tread off of that, of reflect, what else? And aha moment. I was just talking with another individual, and it must have been a TV show or a movie. We had talked about a TV show or a movie, and again, this might be, no doy for many a listener out there, but to watch that, to watch that movie at age 5, to watch that movie at age 10, to watch that movie at age 15, to watch that movie at age 25, to watch that movie at age 40, you continue, it's the reflection piece. You continue to take different things away from it.
How the filter of life changes the thing that doesn't change.
Yeah.
It's the thing didn't change. The movie didn't change. You just, every time you arrived at it, you were in a different place, looking at it from a different angle.
Year 1, that reflection looked very different from year 8 of that reflection versus we'll call it recovery versus recovery now, and that reflection.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, it's reframe, right? So reframe can happen and you notice and observe it. And then you can also actively reframe. Like, how can I look at this differently from a different angle? I love that. I love that. TS, tell us, how can people find you and get in touch with you if you'd like them to?
So I'm trying to keep overhead low. I don't have a website yet. So LinkedIn, love LinkedIn. So there is a Hamilton Coaching and Consulting page out there, or you can go, straight to my profile. Connect with me, please. I love collecting, collaborating.
And all this will be in the show notes, so people can just click on the hyperlinks.
Yeah. I try to maintain, I'm trying to use the socials to kind of prop up business and business marketing. So, Instagram's out there, Facebook out there, my email, which you can get to, you can connect through any one of those socials as well. So yeah, I have an internet presence, I guess, in short.
Yeah. Okay.
Form.
Cool. Everybody's path is everybody's path. There's no right or wrong path, right? Also, what I do with every guest in every episode, because I feel like it's an important part of your story too, is like, who do you support or who would you like to support? So I do this thing called acknowledgements, where if there's any individuals or causes or organizations that you want to give a voice to because they're important to you, or maybe they wouldn't otherwise get, as much press as you believe they should get, who would you like to acknowledge? And that can be individuals, organizations, or even if it's just a resource that you've been taking advantage of, like books or podcasts or what have you.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, because it's shared between you and I, ATD Sacramento. I mentioned building communities, or trying to break into communities. And when my wife and I first moved to Sacramento, and I gave this kind of speech when I stepped in as president of ATD Sacramento a couple of years ago, it was truly like the first community. You're a stranger in a strange land. It was truly like the first community where I felt accepted and embraced, and felt like, a little bit of self-serving, but there were resources that I could take advantage of and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think, you and I continue to both be active in the ATD Sacramento space. So,
and that's what that community was created for. It's not self-serving. I mean, that community was set up so you could take advantage of resources and so forth. Yeah.
So, the wonderful ATD Sacramento. As a dovetail off of ATD Sacramento, Katrina Kennedy, she's an amazing mentor. I always, call myself a disciple of Katrina, the Katrina Kennedy School of Design thought. So Katrina's been amazing, and just from a connection standpoint as well. She does the Let's Learn Together. I think you can get out to it again, LinkedIn or her website, right? Katrina Kennedy training, her website. So that's a pretty cool space as well for Katrina, and then her Let's Learn Together event. And then kind of from the development piece as well, a little while ago, somebody turned me on to Tim Ferriss and the Tim Ferriss podcast. I had read through you can't read through it, but his book, Tribe of Mentors. And Paul, this might be an idea for you eventually when you get a larger collection down. But he took snippets from each of the interviews and kind of sectioned them out. If you were, kind of exploring health and wellness, you could like flip through the book, and then there'd be like, there's one, Stephanie McMahon from the WWE. Sorry, I was big into WWF back in the day, but like talking about at every meal, slamming a glass of water to avoid dehydration. And I was like, oh, like I like that. I'm going to do that. So, but yeah, Tim Ferriss, he's got his podcast. He, I think recently had on a great speaker, Apollo Robbins. That was just so fascinating. He just comes at things from like different angles, which is really, really kind of cool.
You had mentioned 2 books also you had shared with me to put in the show notes, Emotional Intelligence and The Coaching Habit.
Yeah, Dr. Travis Bradberry and Gene Greaves, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Since for rounding things out, I think a lot of the kind of things that we talked through today, I feel like I have like a hyper self-awareness that goes on, and sometimes it does me well, and sometimes it doesn't do me so well. But that's a great resource for those kind of looking at an intro to emotional intelligence and developing themselves too.
Yeah.
And then the other one we were talking about, Coaching Habit, Michael Bungay Stanier. Yes. He's developed out a social media presence. And actually, I've kind of taken a page from his book of doing the walk and talks. It's interesting how just moving your body can send conversations in different ways.
Yeah. So, okay. Good. Yeah. Well, we appreciate the acknowledgments, and I have enjoyed the conversation. You and I will probably talk more off the microphone. I'm looking forward to that as well. And thank you again for being part of the podcast and bringing your story today and being able to share with us your experiences.
Thank you for the opportunity to share, Paul.
Have a great rest of your week.
You too.
What an honor it is to witness these stories from these amazing human beings, and today's guest was no exception. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. I can't tell you how magical it can be to set aside your expectations and just let your thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper. You don't have to have an agenda. You don't have to do anything with it, but you can be amazed at what comes out of your thoughts and onto paper and what that can do for you. I know freestyle journaling has been a powerful practice in my life for a very long time. You just never know what you might discover about yourself. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. Follow me on social media at Off the Comma, and also look for upcoming workshops and events at offthecomma.com, or better yet, go to offthecomma.com and sign up for my mailing list and let me bring the news directly to you. I am passionate about keeping this podcast ad-free so that we create a safe container for people to be able to tell their stories uninterrupted by commercials and promotions. I currently cover all the production costs and I'm happy to continue doing so. And I'm also open to and appreciative of any donations that anyone would like to contribute. This is nothing more than to be able to support the podcast and cover some of the monthly editing and producing and equipment costs that are associated with this podcast. So look for the donations link in the podcast descriptions wherever you find this podcast. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast, and more importantly, spread the good word. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. As always, keep noticing.